Welcome, everyone. I'm Zen Master SebastianRizzon. Welcome. This talk tonight is going to be about why do we meditate? So in modern society, with so many things going on and so many things to do, sometimes it might feel illogical to just sit and meditate when, there's so many things to be concerned about. There are so many things that can occupy your mind, such as your family, your relationships, your job, the environment, politics, even the threat of a big war breaking out right now. With all these things happening around the world, it might be hard to convince yourself that sitting quietly and meditating can be helpful. The truth is, with all these things going on, it can sometimes feel overwhelming. Sometimes it feels like everything in our society is so messed up, you could spend your entire life trying to fix it and not make any progress. The truth is, with all the things going on in our lives, it can sometimes feel overwhelming. You could probably spend all day thinking about the things going on in the world and trying to come up with solutions on how to fix them. However, if you spend too much time thinking about the past and how we got ourselves into this situation, it can lead to regret and depression. And if you spend too much time thinking about the future and all of the potential problems coming our way, it can lead to anxiety. Almost everyone I know experiences some degree of anxiety or depression in their life at some point. These are probably the most common illnesses of modern society, and I believe meditation can be incredibly helpful in overcoming these things if you can learn how to incorporate it into your life effectively. But that can take a lot of practice. This is one of the main reasons I host this class, so we can practice meditating together. So there are many practical reasons to meditate. If you get good at meditation, you can learn how to control your mind, your thinking, and your emotions. It can help you to clear your mind so that you can make better decisions. All of these things can help you reduce your stress, which can have dramatic effects on your physical health. The other day, I had to go to a doctor's appointment in downtown Boston, and this meant I had to drive downtown during rush hour to get there. And I knew it would take longer than normal, so I gave myself plenty of time to get there. When I started driving my normal route, as soon as I got around the block, there was construction and the road was closed. So that was no problem. I just set my GPS and found a different route. And then I got a few more blocks away, and there was more construction in my way, and it was blocked again. This time I was rerouted by the traffic guard, and he sent me in, so I was heading in the wrong direction. And by the time I figured out how to get back on the right way, I was sitting in so much traffic congestion from the construction that I wasn't sure if I was going to make it to my appointment on time. So when I finally got there, I parked and I almost ran to the appointment to make sure I would get there on time. And I made it, but it was a little bit stressful. And the first thing the doctor did was take my blood pressure. And she was a little bit concerned about how high it was. So I told her it was probably because I was rushing to get there, and I asked her to give me a minute so I could meditate. I told her I'd be able to lower my blood pressure. Then I meditated for a minute, and when she took it the next time, it was normal. She was kind of impressed about how much of a difference it made, and you might wonder how it's possible how I knew I could do this. I knew I could do it because I had been practicing meditation for many years, and I had learned how to use my mind to control my body. I used the techniques I had been practicing to calm myself down and reduce my stress. So with that said, I'd like to show you some of the techniques that I use so that you can learn these tools and perhaps they might be helpful to you in the future. So with that, we'll just practice these together, and we'll end up doing about 20 minutes or so of meditation. So first, let's start with a breathing technique. This can help you relax and prepare your body for meditation. So I want you to start by breathing a little bit slower and a little bit deeper than you usually do. Visualize your heart in the center of your chest as you breathe. As you listen to me, I want you to slow down your breath and breathe a little bit deeper and a little bit slower. Feel your breath coming in through your nose and mouth and collecting all the energy from your brain and moving it from your head into your heart. Imagine now that you're breathing with your heart. The purpose is to try to align our mind, heart, and body. You can also place your hand on your heart and close your eyes if you'd like. And just keep breathing a little bit slower and deeper as I talk. This is a technique you can use to relax or reset yourself whenever you feel nervous or anxious, or whenever you feel like you need to switch gears from different activities that are going on throughout the day. You can use it when you wake up, before you enter a stressful meeting, before you go to sleep, or before you meditate. So let's just take a few more moments to take some slow and deep breaths. So tonight we'll be doing a mantra meditation. When we get started, we're going to turn around in our places and face the opposite direction. So usually we'll be sitting with our legs crossed, and if you want to kneel like that, that's fine as well. It's not too important exactly how you sit as long as you're comfortable. But I do want you to try to keep your neck and your back straight. And we'll meditate with our eyes closed, but if your eyes were open, they'd be at a 45-degree angle looking at the floor. And then you want your hands like right hand, left hand, touching thumbs, and then centered in your lap. Yep, so just try to keep a straight posture when you're meditating and don't slouch too much. But if you get uncomfortable during meditation, you can stretch out or stand up. Just try to be quiet and respectful of everyone meditating around you. In traditional Zen meditation, a mantra is used to clear the mind. The mantra is the focal point of meditation, usually a word or a phrase that's repeated within your mind. If you try not to think, thoughts will inevitably come into your mind. By focusing on a mantra, you can use it to push out all of the other thoughts. As you meditate, only concentrate on your mantra. If another thought comes into your mind, let it pass and return to focusing on your mantra. You can use anything you want as a mantra during meditation, but I usually suggest using the mantra of Kwanseum Bosal. Kwanseum Bosal is the bodhisattva of love and compassion in Korean Zen. In Chinese, I think they call her Guanyin. She's often depicted with thousands of eyes and hands, and is said to be able to see the suffering of everyone and help those who call out her name. Using this mantra will bring compassionate energy towards you while you meditate. So now let's turn around and we'll meditate for about 20 minutes or so, okay? You can open your eyes. So if that sitting position is really painful for any reason, like you don't have to necessarily sit like that to meditate. You can sit on a chair and just kind of sit on the edge of the seat so you're not leaning on the back. Just sit forward a little bit. You try to keep your feet flat on the floor and keep your back straight, and then just do the same thing with your hands. You don't have to meditate now. I'm just giving you some hints for, if you want to try it at home a different way. You can also just lay down flat on your back and meditate in that position. So I don't like to teach like that you have to be very strict about the way you sit. I think it's good to keep a good posture so that you don't like hurt yourself or anything. But I think that it's more important that you meditate, and if it's extremely uncomfortable and that's preventing you from meditating, it's just find a position that is comfortable. So that would just be my advice, if you want to continue this practice at home. Everything else is the same as far as the mantra meditation or breathing or whatever. So there are many practical reasons to meditate. It's been shown to help with physical health and mental health. It can also help you clear your mind, which can help you make better decisions navigating your life. You might be able to use some of these techniques that we tried to help you right away, but it usually takes some practice to get good at clearing your mind. Like most things, it takes a few repetitions before you can learn to trust this as an effective tool. Quite often, when you're really stressed out, it might feel counterintuitive to sit still and do nothing. So it really helps if you've been practicing before that happens. Also, when things are going really well, sometimes you might think you don't need to meditate. But like any skill, if you don't practice, you won't get good at it. I hold these classes so we can practice together, and hopefully these talks will encourage you to try to incorporate meditation into your daily life. Then it can become a really useful tool for you. I would suggest that you start practicing these techniques on your own outside of class as well. Start by trying some of the breathing or the mantra meditation techniques for just 1 minute a day, and try to do it every day. It's helpful if you can set aside a certain time to do it. I usually suggest doing it early in the day, maybe right after you wake up. Just sit on the edge of your bed and meditate for 1 minute before you do anything else. Then you can start each day with a clear mind. If that's too easy for you, you can try more time, but always try to do at least 1 minute a day. Then after that, you can try to do it more times throughout the day. And after a while, you can remind yourself to try it whenever you feel stressed, anxious, or whenever you feel overwhelmed by your thoughts. It's much harder to remember to meditate in those types of situations if you haven't been practicing. So try that out. See if you can do it for 10 days in a row. That sounds pretty easy, right? Well, it's simple to say, but it's actually not always easy to do. Some days it feels good and it's easy. Other days it might feel really hard to concentrate, or maybe you get a cramp in your back or your leg and it feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels really helpful. Other times it might feel like it's not helping at all. Sometimes it feels like you made a lot of progress in your practice and you're getting better at it. And other days it feels like you're not making any progress at all. The point is, no matter how it feels, try to meditate at least 1 minute every day. This is how it becomes a routine. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't think about it anymore. You just do it. If you can do it for 30 days in a row, I bet you'll notice it's having an effect on you. If you make it to 100 days, you'll probably want to continue doing it every day after that. So try it out for the next month. See if you can do it every day. And let me know if you notice anything different. If it doesn't work for you, the most it's going to cost you is 30 minutes, right? So it's not too much. And if it works, it could be a life-changing practice, as it was for me. Also, don't get discouraged if you happen to miss a day. Just start over the next day and keep trying to see how many days in a row you can do. Keep trying to develop a consistent routine. That's really the key to success. Most people don't try meditation once and then automatically have a clear mind or get enlightenment, because thoughts and emotions are always arising. That's why to keep your mind clear, you need to develop a consistent practice. Then you can constantly clear your mind out. And over time, it gets easier and easier to keep your mind clear. But it's not always easy, and it doesn't always feel like it's working. So sometimes it requires a little belief or buy-in to what you're trying to accomplish. Think of it like playing a musical instrument or a guitar. Most people don't just pick up a guitar and sound like Jimi Hendrix, you know. It takes practice. You might take inspiration from hearing someone like Jimi Hendrix, but you won't sound like him right away. You have to convince yourself that if you practice, you'll get better. Then over time, with a lot of practice, you can improve. My school, the Zen Art Center. I'm trying to show that various art forms can be used as moving meditation. And I use the word art very loosely, meaning anything that you put your heart into. I'm trying to teach about the relationship between sitting and moving meditation. I want people to understand that activities like writing and making art and playing music can be forms of moving meditation. The type of art or activity isn't that important. The idea is more about developing a consistent practice and trying to completely focus on what you're doing as if that is your mantra. Over time, after practicing a skill such as playing an instrument, when you get better at it, then you start to get into a groove. And then when you're in that zone playing, you don't need to think. You can just completely focus on what you're doing. Then, if you're playing with a band for an audience, you can just take in everything that's going on around you. And as you become aware of what's going on around you, you can sense the temperament of the audience and what the other members of the band are doing. At that point, you can feel when it's the right time to play and what notes are going to produce the reactions you desire. And when you experience this type of flow state, that's a form of meditation. Has anybody ever experienced that kind of feeling in other activities? I don't even play an instrument, but I've experienced it a few times.
You feel like riding a bike?
Yeah, riding a bike, definitely.
Yeah, I had to play basketball.
Playing basketball, yeah.
The funny thing is, once you realize you kind of in it, it's gone.
Yeah, once you think about how well it's going, you're like, oh, it's gone. Yeah, so the first few times I experienced this type of flow state was when I was playing sports, or snowboarding, actually. But also, like, different sports. I'm not as good at basketball, but other sports I felt that way. At that point in my life, I didn't know anything about meditation or Buddhism, but I love the way that made me feel. What I've learned through many years of meditation practice is that you can produce this type of experience with any activity if you're completely focused on what you're doing. But it usually requires some level of mastery of the skills you're performing. This means it requires a lot of practice. The art form that I was practicing when I really started to understand this idea was martial arts. My Zen teacher was also a martial arts master. So practicing with him was very helpful for me to making these connections. It doesn't really matter what the skill that you learn is, as long as you treat it like a meditation. To master a skill, you need to practice persistently and concentrate on improving your techniques. However, to become a true master of yourself, you can't just focus on the parts that come easy to you. You have to dig deeper and figure out how to become proficient at the parts that are the most difficult and challenging to you. Then you can learn to truly believe in yourself. A lot of Buddhist schools, they focus on different aspects of Buddhist teaching. In Theravada, they study the Dharma through ancient scriptures, which they believe are an official record of the words of Buddha. In Mahayana, they study a more expansive set of texts, which includes the sutras. In Zen, which is what I teach, many schools just focus on sitting meditation. This is sometimes referred to as zazen. I've encountered some Buddhists who say they don't even do any sitting meditation. They just try to understand the Dharma through contemplation. I think it's important to recognize that there are many aspects of the practice, and they can all offer some sort of value or insight. And I personally think it's possible to glean some of the same insights from other religious and spiritual practices as well. I've met many Buddhists in my life, and they practice in all sorts of ways. I'm not really sure how successful they are in these different approaches, but I can say that I've only met or even heard about a few people who've attained enlightenment. I've never heard a story of anyone getting enlightenment just from hearing Dharma teachings or attending a Dharma talk. Also, it's easy to feel a sense of inner peace if you just isolate yourself and meditate. But it's actually not practical to do that forever. At the moment you have to leave your little isolation bubble, you'll inevitably encounter someone who's a jerk or something else in your life that bothers you. Also, if sitting meditation is the only thing that was important, Buddha would have just stayed in isolation and meditated. It's important to remember that the last thing he did was action. He went out and he interacted with the world, and he was a teacher. So I think we all recognize that we can't stay in isolation meditating. At some point, you have to interact with the world. So how is it possible to maintain inner peace when you have to interact with the challenges that reality is constantly imposing on you? This is the part of Buddhism that I struggled with the most before I met my teacher. Everything sounded great, and it made sense logically, but it seemed impractical and impossible to apply the teachings when I was faced with the pressures of modern life. For me, when I started to try and do sitting meditation, I always found it difficult. And when I had success, it was hard to carry that feeling of inner peace beyond the times when I was sitting. These struggles continued for a while until I met my teacher. My teacher was great Zen master Chengsi Kim, or I called him Sabu Nim. He taught me about the link between sitting and moving meditation. He did this by teaching Zen meditation and martial arts together. This was a different approach than I was used to, but it made a lot of sense to me. He would explain how to use martial arts as a form of meditation like this. He would say, a clear mind makes clear thinking and clear action. And clear action clears your thinking, which clears your mind. This became quite apparent as I practiced the martial arts. If your mind is clear, you could concentrate on the martial arts techniques and the choreography and not make any mistakes. If you completely focused on your actions, you wouldn't be thinking, and it would clear your mind. The moment your mind would start to wander off onto something else is when you would inevitably make a mistake. It was sort of like a litmus test to be able to tell if your mind, thinking, and action were clear. After many years of listening to his talks, sitting in meditation, and practicing martial arts, I began to apply this to other things I was doing. I was slowly learning how to turn all of my other actions into meditation. Through this practice, I started to understand how I could meditate through all aspects of my life. Yet it still took me many years of constant practice to get good at it. As soon as I learned how to do this, my life started to change significantly. At first, it was incremental and maybe hard to notice, but after years of dedicated practice every single day, without missing a day, it completely changed me, and it became integrated into everything I do. It's interesting how things worked out. First, I learned Zen and martial arts from my teacher, and then over years of practice, I mastered all of the skills he taught me. Then I started to develop my own art forms through meditation. I had always been proficient with math and science, and I worked as an engineer for over a decade. But I was never really much of an artist or a writer. After years of martial arts and meditation practice, out of nowhere, I began to make drawings and write poetry with a level of skill I had never demonstrated before. When I showed my teacher and I told him what was happening, he told me to keep meditating and I would get art enlightenment. Now, years later, I've written a book and produced art that I never could have imagined doing before. I'm not sure how to fully explain how this happened, but I'll try to explain the process the best way I can. First, I learned about meditation and how to become a master of martial arts and sword from my teacher. Over time, I mastered all of the skills that he taught me, and I committed to practicing every single day. During my practice, I just tried to concentrate on what I was doing and keep clearing my mind. I did this for over 13 years until I could effectively keep my mind clear. When I finally emptied my mind, it changed the way I saw everything. The way I could draw and describe things began to reflect that. Then my art and the imagery from my poems started to reflect my mind. Much in the same way the martial arts forms I would perform had been a reflection of my mind. Through this experience, I've realized that these lessons that I've learned can be applied to any art form. This is the purpose of this school and the classes I teach. I want to help people understand how to apply Zen practice and meditation to all different types of art forms, and ultimately every aspect of your life. I'm here to teach about the link between sitting and moving meditation, as my teacher taught me, so that you can learn how to use this process to understand your mind and the essence of your being. This is a simple process to describe, and anyone can do it, but it's not easy. It requires a consistent routine of meditation practice. You must also learn to be a master of an art form or a skill and use that process to become a master of yourself. This means you must learn how to have complete control over your mind and body. This will teach you to believe in yourself. When you believe in yourself 100% beyond any shadow of doubt, then you will understand your mind. In Zen, we say that if you can see your mind, you can understand the essence of your being. And that's what we call awakening or enlightenment. This is possible for everyone. And you can start by meditating 1 minute. Then try to expand that practice until you can learn to apply that level of focus to everything you're doing. Then eventually your mind will become completely clear. Just keep going and keep trying. At some point, it's going to feel like there's no way forward, no way to progress, and no direction you can turn. When you reach that point, remember your mantra. Keep meditating. When the universe aligns in a certain way around you, it will reveal your path. If you've been practicing meditation every day, you'll be prepared to seize this moment, and you'll know exactly what to do. I hope you all can experience enlightenment someday, and I wish you good luck on your journey. Thank you for coming tonight. And I will stay and answer some questions if anybody has any about anything. Zen, meditation, the stories I told, what the mantra is, what the mantra was again, anything. Any questions?
Are you a full-time artist right now?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of depends on what you call art, I guess, you know.
You said you used to be engineers.
Yep. Yeah. So now I consider myself a full-time teacher. But I make art, I sell art, and I teach Zen. So I do a lot of different things, but I consider all of those things arts in themselves. So.
But you are no longer doing engineering work.
No.
That was a concentration.
Yeah. So I switched doing that
What fostered that change? Just
Well, I was working as an engineer, and I felt really kind of unfulfilled doing that. And I felt like I didn't feel good when I went to work every day. I just kind of felt like it wasn't the right place for me. And I liked it. It was like the best job I had ever had, but it just didn't feel like, I felt like something was missing. And then I started training martial arts and learning meditation from my teacher at the same time. And then I ended up moving into the temple with him, but I was still working as an engineer. And then every time I got really into it. And so every time I would have like a day off or some time off, I would just train martial arts and meditate. So it was kind of just what I wanted to do with my free time. And then I just decided, after I reached like the instructor level, that I wanted to try to start a martial arts school. And so I started a martial arts school, which also is like, the whole martial art I practice is a Zen martial art. So the story with my teacher is he grew up in Korea, like during the Korean War, and you know it was kind of a rough time to be there, and a lot of people didn't. It was like war, so people didn't have work, they didn't have food, things like that. And then one of the really famous Zen masters from Korea came to his village, and he was like, I think 12 years old or something like that. And he said, you have a martial arts face. And he said, if you come to live with me, you'll become a great martial arts master someday. And then he didn't actually have a lot of options, so it was like a really good opportunity for him. So he went to the temple and he lived with them. And then he was like, when do I learn martial arts? And his teacher's like, I don't know martial arts. He's like, you have to just say what I do, and someday you'll figure it out. And so he just did whatever his teacher told him to do, and meditated. And then after 8 years at the temple, his teacher, I'm leaving out some parts, but his teacher told him he was ready. And he went up on a mountain and meditated for 90 days. And then when he came back, he had all of this martial arts knowledge.
it's like Batman.
And he knew how to use a sword and do karate. He also knew like 2 swords in both hands, long stick, short stick. He had like this vast wealth of knowledge in martial arts, and he had never taken any martial arts classes. And he told me he didn't even know really like what it was. Like he just started showing people, and they were like blown away at how good at martial arts he was. And then I studied with him for 16 years, and and I'd studied other martial arts before this. It's a deep amount of knowledge in there, and just really interesting techniques that I'd never seen anywhere. So I don't know how to explain it. You know, he's told me some stories about, you know, his meditation experience, but he basically said it came to him all at once, like in a flash. And it's interesting because that's how he taught me about Zen, was through this martial art, and how to use the forms as your mantra. The forms, which is like the choreography of the art. We call them forms. So there's like basic forms, which are like basic techniques, and then you put those together in different orders, and they have different choreographies, and that becomes like a form. And yeah, so he would just teach through those things, and a lot of times I use those as my mantra. When I'm meditating, sometimes I will, what I call mind train, and visualize myself doing those forms.
How did you hear about him?
I actually, he had a temple in Boston, and I lived right down the street from there. And then I was going through kind of a rough patch in my life and like having all these thoughts about how I didn't really like my job and stuff like that. And my friend was like, and we were talking about Eastern philosophy and Taoism. I had started reading a book about Taoism, and I had told him I liked martial arts. And my roommate was like, you know, my friend used to live at this place down the street. They teach martial arts and meditation. He's like, I think you would like it. And so it took me a while, but then I finally went and checked it out, and then I started training. Just there after work, I'd go, and then like after like a couple months, I moved in there, and then I lived there for 16 years, and actually lived there. You know, as soon as I started training, I moved in, and then I stayed until my teacher passed away, and then I decided that it's time for me to go out and teach. I was kind of thinking about doing that beforehand, but and I'd already started teaching, you know, under his supervision, but he got kind of sick for a while, so I stuck around probably a little longer than I would have, and then till he was gone, and then I just decided it was my turn to go to carry on and try to teach people these things. And I have my own little take on it, like I'm using it more expansively, you know, to say, and he would say this too, but he specifically taught the martial art. But I'm trying to teach people that you can use this with any art, any skill. You know, some people I work with are computer programmers, and that's their art. You know, I use that term very loosely. I think anything you do can be an art if you treat it that way, and if you're putting your heart into it. And so that's why I decided to call this place the Zen Art Center. So, because I'm trying to marry those two ideas together.
What was the mantra that we were using?
Kwan Seum Bosal. So, Kwan Seum Bosal. And that's the bodhisattva of love and compassion. And as I said, they say she has thousands of eyes so she can see the suffering of everyone and help those who call out her name. And so a big part of, you know, Buddhist philosophy in general is trying to understand the root of your suffering and trying to alleviate that, and then trying to help other people do that. So it's a positive mantra you can use. You can really use any, if you don't remember that, you can use any mantra, really, as long as you're focused on it. I just suggest using something you have a positive association with. And then also just, I think this is the important thing I was trying to convey today, is trying to use whatever you're doing, having that level of focus on what you're doing. So if you're eating, you try not to think about, you know, something going on at work or, you know, with one of your friends. Just try to eat, you know, and stay focused on that moment and not let your mind wander out of that moment. And that's what I mean by turning your actions into the mantra. Then there's no thinking gets in between you and your mind and what you're doing.
Because while you were going through this transitional phase, like as you were walking away from your old concentration, like engineering and all that stuff, and slowly transforming into, you know, taking a study with your teacher, or started teaching, or doing all these digital arts, or the stuff that you said you never thought about you would thought before. Has there ever been any doubts or fear, or, you know, any negativities or negative emotions or responses to that change?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think a lot of people, going back to when I first moved into the temple, I think a lot of people close to me questioned why I would want to do that. You know, they thought it was, so I think some of them thought it was weird. Some of them thought, you know, like my dad thought it was like, he's like, sounds a lot like the military. Why do you want to do that? You know? And because there's a lot of rules you had to follow, you know, living at the temple. yeah, I think when I decided to stop doing engineering, like my grandmother thought I was crazy, you know, like why would you give up such a good job, or you know, I just I was in a position where I didn't have to worry about like a family or anything like that, or I didn't have people depending on me, so I had a lot of freedom in that way where I could make those kind of decisions, and you know, if it backfired, I only had myself to blame and myself to be responsible for. But honestly, like I didn't, even back then, I felt very confident, like I felt really drawn to it. So I think I had a lot more doubt in those days. But by the time, you know, when I started my martial arts school, that was just all I wanted to do. So I didn't really know, you know, how to, it didn't feel right doing anything else. So I was just I was ready to try it, and maybe if it failed, I was willing to take that as a learning experience. And then by the time I wanted to start this school, I had already gone through that process of starting with nothing and reinventing myself so many times that it felt like just I'd really become very comfortable with that process. And as far as like making art and writing, this was all a way of me. All of this art, you know, some of it is just stuff that I wanted to do, but a lot, like most of this is trying to communicate the same kind of messages that I talked about tonight through the art. And I had written a book. I've written a book. It's not published, but I have a manuscript that's pretty much ready to go. And a lot of the art that I was making was trying to, I had to draw it for myself so I could explain it in words, in the imagery, in the poem, and I wrote a lot of it as poetry. So, so it was all kind of an organic process. I don't really know like how to, I didn't have a map for it, you know. I was just kind of going by what my heart was telling me. And this is really, I think, the core maybe of what you're asking is, I had learned that if I meditate and keep my mind clear, I could always learn, you know, how to navigate any situation. And I really had built that confidence up over many, many years. And I think that is really where, you know, like I was talking about how you learn how to trust these tools after you practice them and practice them and practice them. And I had really learned to trust the tools, and that when you have a clear mind, you can hear your intuition more clearly, and it's not getting interfered with by other people's opinions and things like that. So you learn to trust that voice that comes from your heart. But I think it's important. I don't know if I would have been successful if I didn't have such a strong routine of meditation, because I really feel like I had just learned to trust myself in that way. And I think sometimes if you're just kind of bouncing around between ideas you've heard and things you're kind of moderately interested in, or other people's opinions saying, oh, you should do this or you should do that, I think it's a lot harder to hear your own intuition. And then by meditating, it can help you really understand that true voice of your heart. And that is what I think, why I think meditation is so important to everybody, so that you can learn to listen to that. And then you can really find your own path in life, because everybody has their own path. You know, it's not going to be what your parents think you should do, or, you know, they're probably trying to give you a good advice, but in the long run, to really find your own path, you need to have a clear mind and be able to listen to your heart. So
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm curious because my journey, I mean, I've been meditating for almost 4 years, but my journey also started kind of similarly. Like I started going to a temple, and uh, they kind of like encouraged I should meditate, and then I immediately started seeing like big like changes. But like you were saying, once you realize and once you think about it, you lose the effect. That's what happened to me. So I'm trying to get back to it. But I'm curious, when you started, when you joined this temple, I never joined, but I'm just curious, like how long were you meditating on a daily basis? Did it grow stayed longer, or was it like at the beginning your teacher said, let's just meditate 5 minutes every day, or was it like hours every day?
So for me, I just started doing it less consistently. You know, at first I was just doing it, and I'd do it one day, I'd skip a day, do it another day, and then my teacher, he was saying, "Oh, I think at that point, he was saying he had meditated 5,000 days in a row, every single day for at least an hour." And so, like after I had been living at the temple for about a couple months, I was like, I'm gonna try and do that. I'm gonna see how far I can get. And so I would try to do at least an hour a day. He said if you got like really sick or something, you could do like a half hour, or but I just tried to do that. And there was a couple days I did get really sick, and I probably only made it like a half hour. But I just tried to do something those days. And some days I got really into it. So some days I did many hours. And I don't know, I think the consistency of daily practice is probably the most important things, and then just growing that. And that's why I say just start with a minute. Start with something you think you can do every day. Like you spend more of that time brushing your teeth every day, right? So why not just start with a minute? If that becomes easy, go for 2 minutes. Eventually go for 5, and then maybe try it a few times throughout the day, and just kind of build it. But always make sure you have that routine of doing at least 1 minute. And, I think if you can shoot for like 30 minutes, that's great. But I wouldn't say start that way, because I think sometimes you put a barrier up that's too hard to do at first. And so it's more important to just develop that habit. And then I think it's also really helpful if you can set aside a certain time of day to do it. So like when you wake up, so that something's always going to come up in the day that makes you feel like you don't have time. But if you start the day with that, then you always will make sure you have time to do that. So
my average is 18 minutes, so it's very less than what you
I mean,
were saying. But yeah, I mean, I need to increase, so that's what I wanted to.
I think that's great though. Like that's a really good place to be.
But when I started though, I was doing like 40 minutes, 50 minutes. Some days I was just like, my maximum was 91 minutes, which I didn't even realize. I just suddenly came out of my meditation, and I was like, it must have been like 15 minutes, and I checked and it was 91 minutes. So, and that has gone. Like I somehow lost that. I mean, I probably know how I lost it, but yeah, that's why I was curious to know. And I mean, I've been doing it for 1,200 days, and it's only 375 hours, so not a lot. So,
But that's pretty. I'm say congratulations. That's a really huge step in the right direction. And like I said, don't get discouraged if you miss a day or you screw up, because that's only going to set that reaction to it is only going to set you back further. Just try again the next day. I actually had I'd gone for 16 years in a row at like basically 1 hour a day or more, and I had a stroke, and I lost my ability to walk. I was in the hospital for 4 days. I didn't know if I was gonna get any better. and that broke my streak. Like, that was it. But I think all of that practice I had built up, like they thought they were I was gonna have to go into rehab to learn how to walk for like a few months, and I ended up walking out of the hospital in 4 days. And I think it has a lot to do with that practice and the mind and body connection. And I remember I reached a turning point lying in bed, like I'm gonna get through all this. Like, I just felt like this inner strength, and then I feel like my body started to respond to that. And as soon as I got out of the hospital, I started doing my meditation retreat again, and it's been 2.5 years since then. So, and like my doctors told me I'd never be able to do martial arts again, all this stuff. I'm doing all of that now at basically the same level I used to do it. So, so it can be really powerful. That's my experience. I definitely credit it with saving my life multiple times, and that time very literally, you know. Like, I feel like it got me through some really rough patches. And it's funny, they were asking me, like, are you feeling sad or depressed? Because I guess when you have something like that happen, it really can affect your mental state. But I was just kind of like, no, not really. You know, like I had learned, I'd become so good at kind of like clearing my mind out. I didn't let myself think about all of that stuff too much. I just kept trying to look at what's next, what can I do next, and kind of concentrate on that. So, yeah.
I gotta get going.
Yeah, sorry, I kept you a little late. It's 8:30, so I don't want to keep anybody too late. I just want to make a few announcements, if you don't mind, but if you need to run, go ahead. I give these talks the third Thursday of every month, so you're all invited back next month. I hope you can make it. I also host art and writing groups once a month, so if you want to come and just make art or write, feel free to join up. And it's just creative groups where we can take some time to create together, share techniques, maybe do a little bit of meditation to learn how to make the link between the art and the meditation. And I'll guide a little bit through that, but mostly just working on art and encouraging and writing and encouraging to each other to do creative things like that. Because I think creating is how you can kind of create, bring what's in your mind out into reality, basically. So that art class is next Wednesday. Like I said, I also teach the Zen martial arts, so if you're interested in that, just talk to me, because I don't have a regular schedule right now. I'm just doing smaller personal kind of training stuff, but I want to have small groups, and you don't need any prior experience to participate in these classes. And also, I rely solely on donations to teach these classes, so if you can afford to make a donation, I appreciate it. There's a little jar on the table right by the exit, and there's a thing to see if you want to Venmo or Cashapp or Apple Pay. That information's there. Really appreciate it if there's anything you can do. And thank you, and have a good night. If anybody does want to stick around and chat for a while, strike up a conversation, talk to the people who are here, talk to me, you're welcome to stick around. Other than that, I don't want to keep you any longer. Really appreciate you coming. And hopefully I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.